year or so of that. It's a tremendous privilege to be here, and I have no particular greatness except for reflecting and what I have been privileged to have from my own mentors here. And I see Deb and Carly, and of course Allison, we spoke earlier, and Joel seems to be on too. It's good to see some friendly names and faces, and I'm hoping that this can be a relatively informal but structured grand round. I do have some slides. There's going to be a place for audience participation, which is really the heart of it, and I hope that segment will be what people really take from it the most. I'm going to do some screen sharing. All right. And can folks see the title slide there? Beautiful.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Okay, so the topic is family medicine and leadership, how we can and should play an important role in our society. I don't have any disclosures or anything interesting to say in that regard. And this is the question I'd like us to focus on today. We'll keep coming back to this. I show it now because I want people to start thinking about it. This will be what we'll talk about in a minute or two. And I'm looking for people to give input on what are our roles in society as health professionals. Some of us in the department are family doctors. There's nurses, social workers, psychologists. There's folks of, in many different facets, but we're all health professionals. And so what are our roles in society? Please continue to think about that as I pay a little more tribute to mentors and teachers that I've had over the years. This is a small sampling of the many mentors and teachers that I've had in different times in my life and fields. I started off after high school in the Navy. There's one of my professors at the Naval Academy, Mary Credico, who has helped me in developing my historical lens for understanding things. Captain Tim Duval, who I deployed with, and always taught me that should work hard, do the right thing, and never let the facts get in the way of a good story. Cassie Miller, who is in medical school, was my chief family medicine mentor. She remains the family medicine advisor, and next week she is in charge of the program, the kickoff course for all the medical students, and she's invited me to participate in that. She's a terrific leader, full spectrum family doc, who's done all sorts of amazing things. Ambassador Ruben Brigady, who he and I go back 30 years, and we met at the Naval Academy, and he's been the U.S. ambassador to the African Union. He's currently the first African-American president of the University of the South, which was founded by slaveholding Southerners in Tennessee who wanted a counterpoint to the Northern universities that were teaching things that they didn't see appropriate. Of course, our very own Charlie Belisle, I say our very own. I feel like he is a son of the state of Maine, and a tremendous leader and mentor. Allison Sammet, I'm going to embarrass you for a moment because you're amazing, and I think that you and on all mentors really, stick out in my mind as the kind of person who will accept us and help us get through times when we're at our lowest, or feel like we're at our lowest, and help us get past that and move on so that we can grow and be there for others. So thank you, and thanks to many other mentors, too numerous to name here. As I said, I have tremendous gratitude, not only for being here today for this grand round, but also just kind of in this moment in history. And I know that it's not an accident. There have been decisions that have been made by people before me and my family and elsewhere My own family immigrated from Eastern Europe. All wings of my family more or less immigrated within a 10-year period from Eastern Europe, those that made it out of Europe. And they were escaping the pogroms, the deadly pogroms of that were started off in Russia and also parts of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, parts of what are now Poland. And the result of those decisions is that I have, in part, I've had these tremendous privileges. I've had the opportunity to have education, housing, healthcare. Nobody's ever, at least to my knowledge, questioned my capacity for scholarship, learning, leadership, based on my skin color or my gender or my sexual orientation or how I present myself. And I've had the opportunity to be myself, to express myself, to fail and fail again. And I don't consider myself special. I think that I've been fortunate, and I'm simply in my own life, my own professional existence, and other parts of my life. I just try to be worthy of the opportunity that I've been given in this moment in history, and to pay it forward, to ensure that everyone has the same sorts of privileges, because that's the right thing. I think that shouldn't be limited to select individuals, but everyone has something to offer and to teach each other. I think everyone should, have the opportunity basically to be their best version of themselves, and that's, I think, at the heart of what being a doctor, a family doctor, a primary care doctor is. We help people be their, have the opportunity to be their best selves, their healthiest, and live their best version of themselves. So with that, I want to refocus our attention on that central question. What are our roles in society? What ways can we help, create that more idealized future, build a better world, if you will? I'm going to start off with one example and explain it, and then I'm going to invite participation, either through chat or an open mic if people want to unmute. And so I'm going to say that one of the roles in our society as health professionals is listener. And when I think of that, I think of a book that has nothing to do with medicine per se, at least on the surface. And this is a book by Lois Lowry, who's a Maine writer. You may be familiar with her work. She received a lot of praise for this book, The Giver. It was considered the best children's or young adult book in the country at the time, and remains on many reading lists. It's a sort of dystopian, futuristic novel. I put it in at the level of 1984 in Brave New World. I'm not going to give away too much. I think it's well worth reading or reading again if you haven't read it since you've become a doctor. I think that has a lot to do with being a doctor, because in this story, in this dystopian society, the vast majority of people in society are freed from the difficulties of having collective knowledge of ugly things that have happened in history, ugly things that or ugly questions or difficult questions that are ethical questions contemporaneously. And the society is freed from those challenges because all that burden is borne by one person who's the receiver of that collective knowledge. And there's a moment, and it's a lifelong appointment. And at the end of one receiver's life, they sort of train a new receiver who's appointed in teenage, as a teenager, to serve the rest of their lives as this one receiver. And so here's this moment in the book where the teenage Jonas, speaking to the old man who's been the receiver, and he said, "Sir, yes, do you have a question? It's just that I don't know your name. I thought you were the receiver, but you keep saying that now I'm the receiver, so I don't know what to call you." The man had sat back in the comfortable upholstered chair. He moved his shoulders around as if to ease away aching tension and aching sensation. He seemed terribly weary. "Call me the giver," he told Jonas. And so I say that I submit that one of our roles is to be a listener, to be a receiver of sorts, to help people as part of coping with whatever people are coping with emotionally or physically, to share their story, to share their concerns. So with that, I want to open it up. Other people's answers, maybe a thought or two about why they think that is a role in our society that we fulfill as health professionals.
We're not used to having to participate in Grand Round, Sam. So we do sometimes. So I think, and I guess this is because I'm thinking of you, and Kohar on my screen is right next to you, and she does so much advocacy work, and Deb on the other side also. And I think of us as maybe at least part of our role as being the voice or a voice. So, and it's not speaking over people, it's amplifying voices that can't necessarily be heard or maybe received somewhere else. So I feel like receiving stories and information and sort of organizing it in a way that we can then speak up and speak for or amplify for the communities and the people we serve.
Indeed, indeed, and Kohar, you've been a phenomenal advocate. You know, I'm a fan and really appreciative of how you take what you see clinically and apply that, connect that upstream to the policy realm. Looks like, oh, Kohar, you said educator.
Yeah, yeah, I just think that a part of our role as physicians, and especially family physicians, is just educating both our patients and greater society about health and wellness and sort of not the facts, but just, you know, these policies that we see clinically, and then we take them for policy come from science and research, right? And so it's just about educating in a greater sense too. I see myself half as a teacher and half as a physician, often when I'm in with my patients. So
yeah, I had one person I think summarized, you know, the whole idea of that you know, like sort of evidence-based approach to things, is that we're not guessing. You know, like when there's a pandemic, or when there's a patient with particular blood sugar level or something, we're not guessing about what to do there. It's, you know, it's informed by work, and not always perfect, for sure, but there's an educational role there, indeed. Joel, good to see you. You wrote to reduce human suffering and promote human flourishing. What do you mean by that? Can you elaborate, please?
Well, I guess I think about it pretty generally, actually. I mean, I think in the various roles we play, whether it's in the clinic or whether it's educating or whether it's advocating, I mean, all these, that's kind of gives me the broad outlines of what I'm trying to do. And I guess I say that to distinguish from like just treating illness or just trying to drive away or reduce the incidence of disease. I think we're trying to do ideally more than that. I don't think health is just the absence of, you know, symptoms and illness. So I think having that second part is the part that's important to me.
That's well said. And we can think of that not only in terms of, like, you know, promoting the flourishing individual, but flourishing community. That's something that I know is Deb and others have instilled in you know, in the social medicine aspects of the residency training, and I know that's part of the training that I got in residency here, but also in medical school and in practice. Other thoughts, other roles. What role do we as health professionals play in society?
Hi, Sam, it's Allison. The other thing I would add, I agree with everything everyone said, but I think we serve a role as caregivers, you know, and that feeds our advocacy work, and it feeds our education that we do, but really putting our patients and our populations of patients, you know, at the center of our attention, and truly thinking about what's best for them as individuals and as populations.
Sure.
I think I would add to that, that often physicians, and we know what it's like when physicians or healthcare professionals don't take on these roles, but to lead and design health systems and health delivery systems and thinking about how we do this, because without health professionals engaged in that work, we miss something about what it really looks like. And so I think it's important that we lead that work, whether it's at a sort of institutional or system level, or like you're doing, thinking about policy level. And that can be governmental policy, but it could be other policy as well.
Exactly, and also influencing the conversation. I'll get into this a little bit more, but there's conversations in society, some of which are in the framework of government. Others are simply in other realms in our society, and participating in writing letters to the editor, speaking, organizing events, can really bend the arc in formal and informal ways, and physicians and other health professionals have huge roles to play in that. I would agree. Other thoughts?
Sam, this is Deb. I was just going to add that in some ways the educator role and the clinician role and give us an ability to bring science to some of the public policy issues that you're talking about. I'm actually going to out you here, Sam, and thinking about the project that you did as a resident, which was linking a library card to smoking cessation, and using the science and the medicine and the, for whatever reason, power and respect that doctors get in the society to advocate for things that might not be seen as medical, and to put your weight with all those other pieces of your training on issues that you see as important that may not be what the world sees as a doctor doing.
Right. Has anybody here ever heard the name Benjamin Rush? A couple of nods. So Benjamin Rush, he was one of the founding fathers, a Philadelphia physician, played a huge role in the smallpox epidemic in 1780s, which was a ravaging through many cities, all sorts of social medicine implications there. He was one of the founding fathers, and so he's a physician in a pre-evidence-based time, but still sat with patients and cared for people across the spectrum of society, and brought the insights from that into the framing of our government, like our whole country, and the structure of our government at the federal level, influencing other prominent thinkers like George Washington. And so that's well said, Deb. I think that's an important thought. I also, there's of course the healer, cure when possible, but also care always. There's preventer, I thought. A lot of what we do is certainly in primary care and public health. I encourage. I want people to continue to think about this central question. It's not. There's not a set of answers here. I don't have a definitive list. I'm going to share my screen again. And okay, you can all see it again. Okay, great. So this is not a definitive list by any means. I came up with some other things, dignifier and coach or a companion, a problem solver. Thinking about folks like Janusz Korczak, physician John Snow in the 1800s in England. He went to Broad Street Pump. There's observers like Jeff Brenner, a family physician in New Jersey, who became known as a hot spotter for identifying that there's a very small number of people that tend to show up in the emergency room a lot, and figuring out the epidemiology of that, the geography of that, and on a micro scale within a city, kind of like what John Snow did, with the infectious disease. Connectors like Paul Farmer, who will say, like, as a physician, if we want to stop disease, we need to zoom out and think about how do we, create a society that functions better, build the infrastructure, and have it be self perpetuating, and getting better and better. There's advisors like Anthony Fauci, Dr. Fauci. There's all sorts of roles that we play in society, and this is something that I think is a question to be asking ourselves throughout our practice as health professionals, but also as we teach others. So I'm going to need a volunteer to be the guardian of a takeaway. There's going to be 3 takeaways. This is the first one, and I just need somebody to read this and remind us later of what it is. And you don't have to remember anything; it'll be on the screen. So, who's going to be the guardian of takeaway number 1? I don't see anyone volunteering. Deb, would you read this, please?
Sure. Our roles are varied and important.
Great, thank you. So in a little bit, we'll come back to that, and you'll remind us what takeaway 1 is. So all those roles that we mentioned are very important, and some of us are going to have more than one, and are going to have a set of them. Some of them and others are going to have a different set, and our roles can grow. So I think that's important. So if that's the one half of the central question, the roles, what about us as health professionals in the field of family medicine? I started thinking about what are the hallmarks of our field many years ago, when I was thinking about going into medicine, when I was thinking about going into, figuring out what field I wanted to go into, what residency. Since I've been, certainly in training, think a lot about what are the facets and features of this thing that I'm knocking myself trying to be competent in. In practice, it comes up, and this is a list that I came up with. These are facets of this field. This too is not definitive. It just happens to be what I came up with, and I'm sure that everyone here could come up with an important, with other important lists in good descriptions. As I was doing this, I guess instinctively was thinking about what about other fields? Like I spent more than a decade in the military before I did anything, before I did my pre-med work. So I started thinking about, well, what are the facets of military? And so I wanted people just to take a moment and compare the list that I came up with for family medicine and military. So here's family medicine and here's the military. You missed it. That's family medicine. This is the military. Okay. So operationally, the things that we do in the military or family medicine are very, very different, basically. But the facets, the features of how do we do it, and what are the tools, what are the sensibilities, what are the habits? There's so much overlap, right? And that got me thinking about how the military deals with this reality. And one of the central things that the military does is to develop leaders. Developing leaders, it keeps the function, the things that the entity does, that the military does, connected to laws and ethics, and as defined in the oaths that people take. It keeps things running smoothly. It provides for a way to deal with uncertainty, and also to grow and get better at what it does. And it does so in institutions like training commands, like at the Naval Academy. That's a sort of service academies are a classic example of how the military teaches leadership. It focuses on leadership. It doesn't believe that people are born leaders versus not. It says that everyone who joins the military at any rank, whatever rank they are, the military needs to invest in their growth as a leader, for the sake of the people in the military, for the sake of the society that the military serves, for the sake of the successful operation. So how does it do it? That's a whole, not only a whole other talk, that's a whole field in and of itself. So, but just to give you a sense of, well, how does the military teach leadership? What does that look like? Here's one example. In the lower left, you see a little book that it's faded. It's called Reef Points, and it's issued to every new midshipman who starts off at the Naval Academy. It's about the size of an iPhone, as you can see. And it's a collection of some sort of canonized snippets, writings, and historical stuff, as well as some practical things like ranks and insignia. It's a little handbook, if you will. And one of the things that's in there is among one of many things that have to be memorized. Not that leadership is about memorization, but one of the things that is so important that it is literally required to be memorized by the new people who arrive at the Naval Academy to train is the qualifications of a naval officer. This is a collection or a excerpted amalgamation of writings by John Paul Jones, who folks may know is considered to be the father of the U.S. Navy. He, I have not yet begun to fight was his sort of famous quote, and he was a great leader in the Revolutionary War. So he wrote, through his letters and other writings, these qualifications of a naval officer, which starts off with this paragraph: "It is by no means enough that an officer of the Navy should be a capable mariner. He must be that, of course, but also a great deal more. He should be as well a gentleman of liberal education, refined manners, punctilious courtesy, and the nicest sense of personal honor." It goes on for 2 or 3 more paragraphs, and please forgive the gendered, 1700s, 18th century framing of things and the language. But the idea here is that leadership can be taught. It can be taught and learned, and there's a whole field or a whole body of work on how that occurs. That takes us to takeaway number 2. And Carly, would you be the keeper of takeaway number 2, please, and read that out loud? I put you on. I'm trying to keep everyone on their toes.
Can't hear you, Carly.
I don't, oh, there's.
Sorry, my mic was off.
Sorry.
Leadership is learned.
Great. So you're going to remind us of that later. And Deb, what was the takeaway number 1?
We're a lot of things, I think, is something like that is the summary.
Yeah, right.
I don't remember the exact words. Sorry, I didn't write them down.
That's okay. We'll come back to it.
Okay.
So takeaway number 2.
We do varied things and they're important. Something like that.
Thank you.
I didn't write it down, but I'm, just seared in my memory.
We do varied things. That the roles that we play are varied and all important, and leadership is learned. Okay, so let's go back to the roles that our central question, roles we play in society as health professionals. The list that we kind of generated together and that we might develop on our own, we have a bias towards the good things, but as professionals, we also have to, to be honest with ourselves, we have to also ask, are we always so noble? Is the role that we play in society always on the right side of history? I took a historical lens to this question, and I came up with, without too much searching, examples where we've not been on the right side of history, we as health professionals. There is, for instance, at slave auctions in this country, there were physicians who would attest to the fitness of the people being sold. Here's a New England trained doctor's bill for such services from Mississippi in 1841. Eugenics in the 1800s, with the formalization of the field of genetics, there became the question of, well, if there's different traits and different, these are inherited, how do we optimize our fitness? How do we create a superhuman or a super family? There literally were like fitter family competitions. Here's a photo from 1929 in Topeka, Kansas. I just see at the eugenics building at this state fair or county fair. The winning family, the ideal family, was there with the doctor, at least one doctor and nurses there who were giving the stamp of scientific authority that this is the best. This has all sorts of implications. I have a bill that's that passed both chambers of the legislature that touches on these sorts of issues in the time of CRISPR and gene editing. We of course live in a time where medical science affords the ability to cure things like cystic fibrosis, awful things like sickle cell anemia, and yet there's also maybe another side of it in what's the conversation that we as a society should be having. That conversation was what the bill is intended to foster. Then there's the famed Tuskegee syphilis study. This people will recall as about a 40-year study in which observational study in which African-American men in Alabama were enrolled without informed consent, and treatment for syphilis was withheld, leading many of them to develop secondary and tertiary syphilis, dementia, and other things that were known to be preventable with available antibiotics. So I bring these up to say that, like, just because we can do good things, we can play good roles, we can also neglect to play a role which is in itself a role. So that's a kind of a heavy thing. I realize there's some major chords and minor chords in this discussion here, but it brings us to takeaway number 3. Perhaps, hi Mark, good to see you. Mark, would you please be the keeper of takeaway number 3, unmute and read this out loud, please?
Indifference is worse than evil itself, that in a free society, some are guilty, but all are responsible.
Thank you very much. So this comes from the writings of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. In 1972, he wrote this. Heschel was a social reformer. You can see there's a photograph of him, in the Selma March, 1965, with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and others. Heschel, his own family came from Eastern Europe, saw horrors at the beginning of the century, middle of the century, and felt like indifference was the real evil. This idea was paraphrased by Elie Wiesel in 1986 when he received the Nobel Peace Prize and was asked what's the greatest evil that he knew of. I think a lot of people thought he was going to talk about the Nazis who killed pretty much his whole family, but he talked about the indifference of everyone else. And so that's something for us to think about as physicians. There's of course huge challenges facing us in our society, in our state, in Portland. Some of which are obviously health related. Others are more intersectionally so. And then there's some things that people might say, well, that's not really health. That's not really what doctors and family medicine oriented people need to be weighing in on. But I think we can think about what Rabbi Heschel said, that indifference to things doesn't, not that we have to do everything or fix everything, but that doesn't absolve us of the responsibility to do something and to get involved. So to recap, Deb, would you remind us of takeaway number 1, please?
Our roles are varied and important.
Thank you. And I hope that people will develop their own lists of, and keep in mind what our roles are, knowing that we can get better at the things that we have adopted as roles, but also maybe assume some new roles as circumstances call for it. Carly, would you please speak to takeaway number 2? Read that.
Leadership is learned.
Indeed. It doesn't just happen. It's like teaching. Some people think that you can be a teacher because you've been to school, but there's actually a whole field of learning how to be a teacher, and there's so too with leadership, and it's something that we in medicine, family medicine, could pay particular attention to. And Mark, please, I know it was just a minute or so ago, but could you repeat again?
Yeah, indifference is worse than evil itself. In a free society, some are guilty, but all are responsible.
Thank you. So with that, I'm going to leave you with some call to action. I do encourage us to all continue throughout our professional lives to ask, what are my roles in society and how can I do them better? Either do what I do better or do new things. And there are many more that we've talked about and have not yet talked about that are the roles. And as a field, I will continue to agitate and advocate for us to teach leadership. It doesn't just happen because somebody has been chief of service. That is part of it, but we can teach leadership in the same way that the military does, because there's so much that we have in common with what the military does, and I think this is something that we could learn from it in residency and in CME, and have been trying to, as ACGME is updating its core competencies and such. I've been pushing for that, and I've spoken to other residencies about this idea. Okay, in closing, I want to share something that I sort of risked off of the qualifications of a naval officer, and I thought maybe Beth, would you please read this version of the beginning of the qualifications of the family physician?
Yes, it is by no means enough that a family physician should be a capable clinician. She must be that, of course, but also a great deal more. She should be as well a person of attentive listening, diverse experiences and acquaintances, insatiable curiosity, respectful manners, and a deep devotion to others and the community as a whole.
Thank you. Thank you. And I put ellipses there intentionally because I hope that through the actions and words of everyone here and everyone that folks here teach and inspire, the rest of it can be written. So I don't have, we can have a Q&A. I recognize people will have to peel off as the need arises. I'm really grateful for the time that you were able to share today, and look forward to continuing to work together on many things together. My contact information if anyone wants to reach out after the session or another day. So with that, we can turn to a Q&A.
Thank you, Sam. If you could unshare your screen, that'd be awesome. Thank you. So I'm going to just get us started because I think a lot of people are kind of curious about this. You really stretched your idea of family physician as leader, moving into the work you're doing now. And I'm not sure I ever really heard why you decided to, run and for a seat in the government and to be one of our representatives, and kind of what part of you felt like, no, this is what I need to be doing and this is how I'm going to lead. I'm happy to share that because it's something that I keep asking myself, keep gut checking myself on, because there's a cost, right? Like there's a cost to my practice, my family, my own sort of sense of balance, to add on something that is incredibly stressful, incredibly demanding on the time, very unpredictable, and it also pays far less than minimum wage. So why would anybody do that? I came to realize that the things that I kept seeing over and over again in clinic and in the community had origins way upstream. And I started to
speak up, speak out, organize, write, advocate, testify. And after about a dozen different issues, campaigns and issues campaigns, and whether it be about vaccinations or public libraries in poor neighborhoods, I felt like, I kept feeling like whatever that issue was, it was at least as important as anything else I could be doing with my professional time and the privileges that I've been given in terms of education and training and a platform. I can remember in 2017 when the Affordable Care Act was under tremendous threat, and realizing that we have a Senate, U.S. Senate, and given the margins, I knew that it just there needed to be 3 senators that might join the caucus that was most supportive of the ACA, and Susan Collins was our senator and was very much might listen to health professionals, and so got very involved. Ended up organizing a group of people that were, then they themselves were leaders. And so I just kind of showed up at one of the early meetings, and I remember seeing Deb at one of those early meetings at the Shaw's house, and just felt like if I could help, even though these were not my patients, the people who around the country were benefiting from the Affordable Care Act and would be cut off from health insurance if it got tanked in that Congress. I just felt like maybe we have a shot here to preserve it. It could be a bulwark, and it ended up working out in that way. I was not, the only. I mean, there were tons of people who were involved in that, but I just felt like that was important. And I remember weeping in the bathroom, like in the middle of the night when that vote in the Senate, when John McCain, Senator McCain, who himself was a Naval Academy graduate and had brain cancer at the time, I think he had a glioblastoma, and showed up in the Senate floor, because you can't vote if you're not literally there. He showed up and he voted down the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. One of the most dramatic moments in American history, as far as I'm concerned, is certainly as a health, in terms of healthcare. And I just wept. And so all that, the time that the stress and the time and sacrifice, and I felt like maybe I wasn't there. That the following, with all those months of work, even though it was at a cost to several things, felt worth it. And so I think about that moment a lot. And when people turned to me and said, Sam, you keep showing up at these these hearings, and what you say is informed, you bring in these great stories from your practice. Can you maybe consider running? I had to give that serious thought, because people, as a secondary question to your question, that people often ask, well, what are your plans? Are you gonna do this? You gonna, the answer is no. Like I don't plan to become a professional politician. I see myself, and I keep telling my father, he keeps calling me a politician. I'm not a politician. I'm a doctor who's involved in policy, and that's how I see myself. Maine happens to have something called a citizens legislature, where people take turns. It's like jury duty, and and we have a government that is representative, and it calls upon all of us to think about what we can do to help those around us, help our government run smoother, and follow a just course. So I guess that's a long answer to say that I just feel like it has the potential to have real impact, like with the Affordable Care Act in 2017. And I can do it and still be a doctor in Maine, because we have this particular structure.
Thank you. That was a great answer. And I wasn't going to ask that follow-up question, actually. So thanks for answering it.
It's so great to see folks. I feel like I've been so busy, and part of another cost is that you don't get to spend time with people that are kind of that are important to you. You're called to learn about many things, couple hundred different bills. A couple thousand different bills, in each session, and so to do justice and feel like your vote is informed as it can be, is extremely demanding. So it's really cool to see everyone.
Sam, I remember a talk you gave to the residents about caring for veterans. And one of the things you told them that was really important was to remember to say thank you for your service. And I just want to say thank you for your service, because you're really, you are giving back to your community tenfold. And I, for one, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Deb. I truly feel grateful, and I have no claim to any particular wisdom. I just have had opportunities, and I just want to help create space for others to can fill shoes even better.
Well, we appreciate you. Thank you. I actually thought the connection between the receiver and the giver was going to be just that. And I agree with Deb, is that something, we give back too. And I feel like that's a huge part of what you're doing. So thank you. I'm going to end because I know people have to go, and we all know how to get in touch with you. And if people don't know how to get in touch with you, they can certainly ask me and I'll send your info along. Thank you for fighting the good fight and for joining us today. And also know that you can always tap us as needed for support and, testimony and whatever you think we need to be doing.
Thank you so much. I reflected right back at you. I so appreciate what you all are doing, and salute you all. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.